Ladies and gentlemen, what happens when an SOS is no savior at all? What do you do except run for your life? It's what happened to a senior executive working for Genpact who was on her way to work in Delhi. Her Ola ride, in her words, turned into a nightmare when her cabbie slowed down at a deserted Gurgaon lane. He had been motioned by two men who were waiting there. Two other men on a bike joined the scene. So imagine, there are 5 men and 1 woman. In a LinkedIn post, this woman says she pleaded with the Ola driver not to stop. When he didn't listen, she says she took her bag and ran. She says she ran for her life. The post does not mention if the cab had a panic button or not. Chances are that it didn't. Most Ola and Uber vehicles don't have panic buttons. But what she goes on to say next is raising major concerns. She says she kept pressing the SOS button on her Ola app but got no response. She has tagged the CEO of Ola, Bhavish Agarwal. There has been no response from him. We requested the lady to join us on the show. She refused, saying she's afraid of retaliation from the cabbie and the men who surrounded her. But she does say something all of us who use Ola and Uber and Blue Smart second. Safety is not merely a feature, but a fundamental responsibility that must be prioritized. We wrote to Ola as well for their response. We have not heard back from them so far. So we at Mirror Now decided to do a reality check of panic buttons in Delhi's cabs, if they exist or not, and if the SOS button on your app is responsive if you do press it during an emergency. Here is what my colleague Kritika found today.
So we booked our first cab through the platform Uber, as you can see on your screens. And as soon as we entered the cab, we saw that there is no panic button, in fact, in the cab. And when we in fact spoke to the Uber partner here, he said he wasn't aware that any sort of a facility is even required to be put in this cab. Now, as you can see with the interiors, you will be able to make out that this is a fairly new cab that has joined the fleet of Uber. And despite that, there is no physical panic button. Now, we will be trying to figure out on the screen of the app over here how we can contact in case there is a safety issue. In the second cab that we've booked through the platform Ola, again we are seeing that inside this car there are no physical panic buttons. So that leaves us with the only option, which is to check how the support features inside the app actually work out. So I'm going through the options given on the Ola app. On the very top you will be able to see the emergency button. If we press it, we have 3 options. We have first the call police, share trip details, or call the Ola safety line.
Let me go straight across to Kritika, who did that spot reality check for us. Kritika, we've seen your report. My point is that you take Olas and Ubers and, Blue Smarts all the time. I want to ask you if this is the, if we did a sample survey, say on other days as well, if this is what you would have found, that the SOS application works, but there is no panic button. Is that the reality of cabs in Delhi?
That's absolutely right. In fact, we've seen only a few Blue Smart cars, which are fairly new in the field of aggregator-based cabs, that have now started introducing panic buttons. In the older players, in Rapido, in Ola, and in Uber, all of these features are missing. Earlier, we thought that it might be an issue only with the older fleet, but even the new ones that we checked did not have this feature, and sadly, none of the drivers were even aware of it. This just raises the question that even if the SOS apps in our phones and our smartphones, definitely they do work, there can still be a situation wherein you would be in a no network zone, which would in fact leave you leave your smartphone of no use, even if there are situations when late at night your battery seems to run out, and in that case as well you cannot always depend on your phone, which is why through a lot of schemes, in fact, panic buttons, through a lot of motions also, panic buttons was popularized so that an automated integrated system can be there, not for just the rescue of the riders, but also in some case for the drivers as well, that these buttons can be pressed request directly the PCR, the nearest police control room, as well as the control room for the aggregator can be put in loop, and they can provide an immediate service and reach out in case of any distress. But what we saw was a sad reality, and none of this is working out on the ground.
Okay, so when you did press the SOS button in both these cabs, in the interest of fairness, Kritika is reporting that there was an immediate response from both the aggregators. I want to ask you, Kritika, about the conversation you had with the aggregators. You were connected to their helpline and you asked them a question about panic buttons, and what was the response that you got?
Definitely, with both of them, when we raised the issue of the absence of a physical panic button, they said that they're not even planning to release it anytime soon, as they're more confident of their app-based facilities, wherein they say that they will be available 24/7. So, as per their policy, in case a rider is in distress, their entire attention is to focusing on making them deboard and getting them a separate ride. But again, this just leaves us very heavily dependent on the mobile phone, and there have been instances where even the mobile phones are snatched. In such a situation, again, they have said that then legal recourse is the better option, which can only be availed later when yourself as an individual has been able to make themselves come to a safety point and then reach out to the police. So definitely there are glaring gaps. Despite notifications, the physical presence of panic buttons are not there, and a reliance on just making sure that the smartphones is always in the hands of the rider is the expectation on which the entire safety protocol currently is functioning.
Okay, Kritika, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much for this reality check. My guest this evening, Samson Seladurai, is co-founder and CEO of I Am Safe Women's Safety App. Thank you for joining us. Anu Lall is an author joining us. Dilip Chandrian is the founder of Perfect Relations with us. And Rekha Agarwal is a consumer lawyer. She's joining us on the broadcast as well. Let me come to you first, Samson. Before coming to the show, we were researching about panic buttons and whether they are mandatory for all aggregators in this country. So in the last 10 years, we took out reports in the last 10 years from various states, whether it is Delhi, whether it is Karnataka, whether it is Uttar Pradesh. And one thing is common. Everyone has the intention. Everyone says that by next year, all cabs will, for the last 10 years, by the way, this has been happening, that by next year, all cab aggregators will have panic buttons, etc. But there is no Government of India law or notification which makes it mandatory. Is that part of the problem? When the government itself is not making it mandatory and maybe putting it in guidelines, and when governments and aggregators are fighting over panic buttons and whether they are necessary or not, passengers are left to fend for themselves. In this case, for the lady, she had to run for her life.
Yes, thank you, Shreya. Firstly, it's very sorry to hear what the women experienced today. And it's even more sad that we are discussing this issue of women's safety in 2024, when being so technologically advanced, in India, we shouldn't be talking this. But nevertheless, what we are trying to do is to address this big issue of women's safety from multiple angles. So what you have shared now is just an angle from the policy making, which plays a very big role of women's safety. And I totally agree with you. From a policy point of view, we should have this totally implemented from a top-down approach. From workplace safety, we do have laws like POSH, Prevention of Sexual Harassment laws, in the last 11 years, and that has played a significant role in workplace safety. But in terms of commuting and travel and public safety, I think it's absolutely essential if all these laws are made as mandatory for all tech companies to implement it. From our I Am Safe point of view, what we have done is we have basically flipped the model from an emergency control room to giving the control back to the user's own trusted contact. So anytime when a woman is asking for help, the app sends an alert to up to 20 of her own trusted contacts with her live location, and the app taking a photo, app taking a recording, and stores it on a very secure database as well.
But Samson, that help may not be 2 kilometers away, it may be 20 kilometers away. Samson, my point is that if you speak to Ola, if you speak to Uber, they say, if you cannot, we cannot rely on what our partners do. We can rely on our app, however, and our app has an SOS button. In the case of Gurgaon and the lady who had to run, the SOS button didn't work. My point is, can you just depend on the SOS button on your app? And can
See,
cab aggregators get away by saying physical buttons not really required, physical panic buttons not really required? My point is, what if your phone has been snatched away by the Uber driver or someone else who's in the cab? What if you're in a no network zone? What happens then? Your SOS button will not work.
Yeah, that's correct. So that's where there has to be a holistic solution, not just a dependence on tech. And tech is only an enabler. And with an issue like women's safety that's big and broad, rightfully, as you said, we need a top-down approach. We need the approach on the education side. We need an approach on the policy level. We need an approach on the whole aspect of women's safety completely, seen from a different angle.
Okay.
But we do know that tech is a big part of it, and therefore if we implement the right solutions and if we educate our people on how it can play a key role, it can certainly be a big enabler. Like, for example, even Bluetooth devices, like, these days we talk big about women carrying a lot of like pepper spray and all of that to protect themselves. But what if we use technologies like a smartphone, an app, or a Bluetooth tag that can aid a woman to protect herself, and in that way she feels more
Anu Lall,
confident.
okay.
And that's what we aim to do at I'm Safe as well.
Okay. I'm not sure women are feeling very confident with what has happened in Gurgaon, Anu Lall. This happened near the National Media Center. We know that that lane can sometimes be very quiet. Most times I've been there, there haven't been too many people there. So you have a cab driver who's not listening to you. He's slowing his car down. You have two men who are motioning him to stop. Then there are two other men on a bike joint. So these are 5 men and 1 woman. She's asking her cab driver, don't slow down. Don't stop. He still stops. I mean, any woman would panic and run, and that's exactly what she did. But what she was counting on was that SOS button, which didn't work. So can we say, and can cab aggregators say SOS button to hai, panic button ki kya zarurat hai?
Surprisingly, things haven't changed. Like when I was hearing Samson talk, this is the same way when I think 25 years ago when I started working, whenever we would go out, we would make fake calls to a friend or somebody, acha main yahan par hu, something, so that the cab driver gets a little aware that, oh, she's on call with somebody, mujhe aisa nahi karna. Reality hasn't changed in the last so many years, right? Whatever we've spoken. And incidentally, an exact same incident happened to me 2 weeks ago. And this seems to be like a modus operandi, just that it happened during the daytime, in broad daylight on the highway. So I didn't make much of it. And now when I read through this lady's post, I was like, this exact modus operandi happened with me also, but I didn't make much of it because it was daytime. Just the difference being just that. And there were 3 men, and here I was alone. Anyway, but that's not the point. The point probably here is that our emergency response systems fail completely. Here you've done an excellent sting operation on these, SOS buttons. But firstly, how hard is it for companies to train their drivers not to stop? Unless it's a cop flagging them down, don't stop. That's the first thing. Secondly, our emergency helplines don't have any sense of emergency. Emergency ka matlab hai apatkaleen, urgent, important. Try calling a helpline, even the government ones. I'll put all of them together. They start with, for English, press 1, Hindi ke liye 2 damaye. I mean, imagine a person who's calling in that state of panic, Even the most calm person will have their hands trembling. And here, emergency response systems, we don't know whether it's picked up by a bot or a real person is actually picking up the call, we don't know. And all emergency response systems, whenever I've tried to contact them in the last, 2 or 3 times that I've contacted them, they are unable to track the caller, even if you connect to them. Anytime I've called an emergency helpline, the response has been, Madam, ye address kahan pe padega? I mean, strangely, food delivery folks never ask for directions, but emergency response services do. All in all, our emergency response in our head needs to change, and then the technology probably also needs to keep pace. We can't just rely on technology. There are so many ways to call up an emergency helpline, and surprise, surprise, when you really need it, nothing really works. Whether it's a panic button or an SOS
Dilip
button
Cherian,
or
did you
even
find it
an
a little
emergency line.
Dilip Cherian, from a brand perspective, are you a little surprised at the messaging that Ola is sending out? Here is a woman, and she's not just any woman, she's a working class woman, right? She's a senior manager at Genpact. She works in Gurgaon. This is in the middle of the day. She puts out a long, lengthy LinkedIn post. She tags Uber. She tags Bhavesh Agarwal, and last we spoke to her was at about 5 o'clock, trying to convince her to come on the show. We asked her whether she had heard back from Ola or from Bhavesh Agarwal. She hadn't. And most of the times that you hear back from an aggregator, whether it's Ola or Uber, and there are enough and more people who will tell you this, the first response is an automated response. You may have faced a life-threatening situation, like in the case of this lady, and the response you get is, "Oh, how much was the cab ride? We'll pay you back. We'll refund the money." No. Who wants a refund? Or you're
I
asking
think,
for a
Shreya,
safety. Are you surprised with Ola's response?
I'm surprised at their response, and I think that this needs urgent correction. I'm very glad that you're focusing on it, because safety needs to be raised as far as all these services are concerned. The ridiculous thing is that we are also talking about dark patches where there is no connectivity. So I don't think that it is about a safety button or anything. It is about cab companies being more responsible for what their partners, their so-called partners or drivers are doing. It is just impossible to shirk it away. They need to come up with more active solutions which are specific to India. The fact is that we have a safety problem for women when they are in transportation of any kinds. And we need to understand that unless women can go out to work, to travel, to visit, whatever they want to do, you are actually disenfranchising 50% of your population. This is very scary for any woman, and every story begins to multiply. So it's got nothing to do with Uber, Ola, Metro, whatever it is. You need to have many more safety checks in place which work, which are guaranteed to receive a response without bots and automated questions as to, are you going to speak in Hindi? Are you going to speak in English? That is not the person who's calling's problem. That is the problem of the person receiving the call, and they should be able to tackle that problem using all the technology which today is available. Meaning it is not difficult to do this. In fact, I think government needs to have also a centralized panic facility where people like this can call, and it needs to be installed across all phones of vulnerable people. And look, if you take the incident which happened in Chandigarh just now, anyone is vulnerable. You don't have vulnerability confined to just women, but certainly as they move around at night in cabs, this is a big issue, and the company should have answered it. The company should have responded to your queries. The company should have made sure that they explained their best case and worst case scenarios. That is going to affect their brand, and they need to recognize they need to work on it.
Okay. They need to work harder. And the first safety net that they put in is doing due diligence when they appoint a driver. That's the first safety check.
Yep.
You need to do it. And every second day, an instance will come up where you get to know that these cab aggregators are not doing their due diligence. Then there is the issue of panic button. Rekha Agarwal, I even hold the government of India responsible. Here's the point. 2019 is when a woman is raped by an Uber driver. 10 years ago. Yeah, almost 10 years ago. It's not 2019, it's even before that. Since then, I have been hearing that panic buttons will soon be made mandatory. There are notifications. For example, in the case of Delhi, there are 2 notifications by the government of Delhi, one in 2021 and one in 2023, making these physical panic buttons mandatory. Yet, Indian Express has done an excellent survey some 2 years ago that tells you that in 90% cars, there are no panic buttons. And all of us travel in these cabs, so we know that in 90% cabs, there are no physical panic buttons. My point to you is, by the way, even the Ministry of Road and Transportation has some sort of notification. Only it doesn't seem to be the law of the land. So I don't understand this. For the last 10 years, governments across this country and the central government have been telling us that these physical panic buttons are going to be made mandatory, and yet nothing has happened. So cab aggregators will do what they want to do. When there is a vacuum, when there's confusion, they will say, हम extra खर्चा क्यों करें? हमने तो SOS दे दिया अपने ऐप पे.
Shreya, you're absolutely right. Despite all these notifications being there, they've not been made a law of the land. So all these notifications end up just being guidelines that in the interest of women's safety, the cabs should have. But whether it is mandatory or not, that there is no may, it is shall. That word is missing. And without such kind of basic safety measures being in place, the kind of incident that has happened to this lady, unfortunately, yesterday, is really very shocking. And all I can say over here as a consumer lawyer is that the cab company and the Uber company and the Ola company, they need to be booked, and the Central Consumer Protection Authority, which has come into force in the year 2019 with the coming of the new Consumer Protection Act of 2019. We have a central authority which can suo motu take cognizance of such kind of cases which are reeking of deficiency in service and unfair trade practice. These are the 2 basic allegations which can be made in a consumer complaint. And any person, any consumer who avails of the services of these cabs, for consideration, that is by paying, that person, whether it is a man or a woman, is entitled to value for money and particularly safety, as in the case of this lady over here. So I think that, whether these panic buttons are there or not, I would expect that as of now, the CCPA should wake up, because thanks to your channel and to other channels, to the social media, everybody is talking about this incident. And since the CCPA has got the authority to take so much note of this, they should be booked for it. And these panic buttons that we are talking about, I think that the discussion is not only limited to having a panic button or an SOS button on your app. The fact is that women, despite the fact that e-commerce is here, but number one, e-commerce is not regulated in our country. We keep making laws every year. Every year, some rule or the other will come out trying to regulate e-commerce. But as of now, despite so many laws, e-commerce actually happens in the air. There is nobody to control them. There is no physical office where you can even go and complain.
And therefore,
so I think that we need to do a lot of checks.
And therefore, it is up to us consumers. Therefore, Rekha ji, it is up to us consumers to demand better from our aggregators, cab aggregators. You have a terrible safety record. I'll try not to take you. I'll try and take someone with a better safety record. Demand better. In this case, Ola CEO has not even responded to this woman. And the point is, many people are asking me, oh, why has she not filed a complaint? Which normal middle-class person who's also working, has a 9-to-5 job and kids at home, has the time to go and file a police complaint and do tariq pe tariq in courts? No one does it, ladies and gentlemen. The point is that Ola needs to take cognizance of what has happened and at least respond to the woman, if not to us. We leave it there for the moment. Thank you everyone for joining us.